previous guest writes the first question. You have it. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, let's do this.
No pressure.
Feeling the pressure. Feeling it. All right, let's see. Describe a moment or event in your career that clearly defined the why behind what you did or you do.
You're more than welcome to take that in both directions, in the sense that you can talk about the company you're doing today, or you can talk about your time in service.
Sure. You know what we'll do is we'll talk about the time in service, because we'll get to the company of today somewhere down the line in this conversation. But, you know, when I was a kid, one thing that always attracted me was science, was math. Like, you know, there were things that were easy, I feel like, in math for me and science, but also I think on the science side, I was always trying to figure out why things were the way they were, right? And what I loved about science as a kid was because you're always asking your parents why, right? And science actually told you why, right? And so even when you went into biology and everything like that, you really got to dig deep. So with that said, you know, I grew up and I had, you know, 4 uncles and my father, but there were 5 boys on my dad's side. And now out of all of them, pretty much either they went tech or they went in healthcare. And my uncle Walter, he actually was the eldest one and actually became a doctor. So I always looked up to that. So I was like, I'm going to be a doctor one day, right? But there were some challenges in life when I was a kid. You know, our parents got divorced at a very young age. We were driving in between New York and Pennsylvania. My dad's family is right outside of New York City, kind of by West Point, up in the mid-Hudson Valley area. And then mom's family is right outside of Philadelphia, so like Westchester and so forth. And traveling back and forth, sometimes those challenges, your academics don't really come up to par of where they really should be once you get to your later years in high school.
Now, when you say traveling, was it the bouncing between mom and dad?
Oh, yeah.
And did it impact you? Like, for instance, did you go to 2nd and 3rd grade at this school and then moved and went 3rd, 4th, 5th?
Oh, yeah.
That type stuff?
That kind of stuff, yeah. So when the divorce was happening, basically we were in New York, and then my mom moved down to Pennsylvania. We moved down there with her. So now we're in from 5th grade to 7th grade going to a school in Pennsylvania. Then 7th grade moved back to New York, basically start of 8th grade. And then we were still bouncing around. It was pretty wild. There was a point of my childhood where in high school where I wasn't living with my mom. I wasn't living with my dad. I was basically on the streets. I was working on a farm. I was given a house. There's this whole story behind that. But to go back to the question, it was basically, I wasn't raised in a house where I could focus on like sports and academics, right? And I really wanted to be a doctor, and I had to figure this out, right? You couldn't focus on sports or academics because, as you mentioned, were you basically told, hey, you got to get to work? There were just a lot of things that happened. I mean, you know, I was big in sports all the way since I was a kid. You know, baseball in like 3rd, 4th grade, basketball, track, football, and all that through high school. But there was a point where, you know, I got kicked out multiple times of the house, right? And there just became one time I was kicked out, and I was like, that's going to be the last time I'm getting kicked out. And I decided I'm going to figure this out myself.
Were problems equal for you with mom and dad, or one or the other?
More on my, at that time, father's side. My mom wanted me to move back to Pennsylvania, right? But I didn't want to do it just because all my friends and my livelihood was up in New York. Right. So I fought against the idea of going back down to Pennsylvania, which would have been a safe bet. You know, I had my mom's support, my grandparents' support, and everything like that. But I had this whole like vision of me staying in New York and like graduating with my friends and stuff. So anyway, you know, in high school, what ended up happening when you go back to the question of like what clearly defined the why and what you're doing today or what you do, you know, when I was 17, we ended up getting a really bad car accident. And we were just kids, you know, we were the kids that like, we would go party in the orchards, you know, up there, and like, we would have a lot of fun, and then we would go down to the diner, right? And then we would just get, we had no money. We had enough to get a cup of coffee. That was like free refills, right? So that was like, $1.25 or whatever it was. And then not to, age myself, but, and then we get we would get French fries. Actually, the best thing in New York when we were a kid, it was like almost like a bowl of French fries with gravy and melted mozzarella on it. A New York version of poutine? New York version of poutine, but if you look it up now, they call them disco fries.
Okay.
Or I think that's the Jersey term for it, is disco fries. Anyway, long story short, we would always take the back roads home, right? And the reason being, in case like a cop caught us on 9W or whatever the case is, it's just a safer route. It was like wintertime. It rained earlier that evening. We were going a little too fast, hit a telephone pole. When we hit the telephone pole, all of a sudden, everyone's like, "Are you all right? Is everybody all right? Justin, you good? Devin, you good? Jeff, you good?" And then I just hear Devin say, like, "Becky's not good. She's bleeding." And so I jump in the back, and basically I'm holding my hoodie. I take my hoodie off because she's bleeding from her nose, and I didn't know what to do. And I felt hopeless. So the only thing I could think of doing, because I knew if I tilted her head back, she could choke on her blood, was I just sat there and caught her blood in my hoodie, super, super tough. And because we took the back roads, and we're talking about, there's no cell phones at that time. We had pagers, right? Like, who are we going to page? 911. So we had to wait basically for the next car to come down this road to go get help. Now, once everybody got to the hospital, we still had hope that things were going to be fine. Unfortunately, she passed. And that was such an impactful moment of my life at that point. I knew things had to change.
There's a moment in life when you realize it was never about you. Grind, spelled GRND, is different. There's no I in it on purpose, because the mindset was never about ego. It's about the mission. Started by a former Army Ranger, it's not about where you are. It's about how you show up. Different lives, different pressures, but the same mindset. Grind isn't clothing you wear just to look good. It's a reminder of why you keep going when it gets tough, and you keep putting in the work when no one's watching. For the early mornings, the late nights, the reps that no one sees. This isn't just fashion, it's fuel. Because real work isn't loud, real effort doesn't need applause, and real purpose doesn't quit. Head on over to thegrndcollective.com and use the promo code TRANSITION15 for 15% off your order.
The background, too, of my family is a lot of military. So my grandfather immigrated over here from Ukraine in World War II, maybe around 44, 43, like at the end of the war, somewhere around there. Came into Ellis Island. He did 20 years in the military, 20 years at West Point. And then my uncle Roy went in the military. My uncle Brian went in the military. My uncle Kevin went in the military. My dad was like really the only one that didn't go to the military. Anyway, when I was growing up, I was like, med school. I was like, there is no way I'm going to the military ever. Like I wouldn't say like I was a problem child. I would say that I was always too curious, and I did not like to stay within lanes. I was all over the place. I was just discovering stuff, right?
Going back to the aspect though, when you talk about sitting in a diner and basically having enough money for coffee and everybody share a plate of fries.
Right.
Was nobody in your life going, but hey, if you went the military route, they'll pay your education?
Not really. At that time, there wasn't anyone that was like push me one way or another. That conversation came up every once in a while. Like, all right, Jay, you're in 11th grade now, 10th grade, 11th grade. Like, what do you want to do with your life? And I was like, I'm going to med school. Like, that was my whole thing. I was like, I don't know how I'm going to get there. I'm going to do it. Right. And I was just very strong-headed. And even though like at that time, between 10th and 11th grade, I was living basically from friends' homes to friends' homes, where parents were basically open their door to allow me to sleep on their couch. I always made an effort, because I knew I wanted to go to med school, to continue my scholastics and to continue the study. And so I was still getting good grades, right? But super unstable, really, really unstable. So, anyway.
What was causing you say unstable, but what was causing the friction between you and your dad that actually forced him to say, get out of the house?
Yeah, my dad ended up getting remarried, and my stepmother, Debbie, which I absolutely love now, it was just like one of those things. At that time, she was really young, right? So at that time, she was probably 26, 27, 28, and she's dealing with two adolescent boys, right? That are 13, 14, 15, 16, So my brother and I were the ones that were kind of going through that whole thing. My brother actually ended up staying. He moved to Pennsylvania, like when we moved, and he actually never came back. He stayed there with mom. And then I always knew that no matter where life takes us, I can't run away from that problem, and I'm going to have to solve it anyway. So why not solve it now and face it? And so I was already thinking about it back then. And I'm so glad that I did, because now like we have great relationships, super bumpy back then.
Right.
But that relationship is there and really solid.
Was your dad, and I keep deviating from your story.
Yeah.
You'd already talked about the military in your family, but in your mind, there's no way I'm going that route.
Yeah.
What was your dad pushing for you?
Oh, I mean, he was the I wouldn't say typical father, but he was the one that was like, always wanted me in sports, which I love sports, right? He played football, I played football. And then he just wanted the best for me, and just like anyone else. Military was always one of those things that did great for his brothers, did great for his father and so forth. But yeah, I wasn't really, there was a point when I got kicked out, I also said, I'm quitting sports then. And I quit playing football and I started working at that point. But what kind of tore us apart a little bit was just probably the friction between him and his new wife, which is my stepmother, right? And then his son, right? That comes from a previous marriage. And
So
that,
not your stepmom.
yeah, not that, like, obviously the fights would happen between.
What I mean is you said the other son, was that from an even different marriage, or was that from your stepmom?
My brother and I. So that's from my father and my mother, right? We're blood brothers. And then basically what I'm saying is like, she had to deal with two boys that were in their adolescence, and then it would cause friction with him and her. And so we would get yelled at one way or another, wherever it was coming down. It just caused a ton
Did I
of friction in the
misunderstand?
house.
Is there a step sibling in the mix?
No.
Okay, so it's just you and your brother.
Yeah.
But you've got a 13 and 14-year-old kids.
Yeah.
And a younger new stepmom. So there's just it's not the recipe for
Success.
chocolate chip cookies and Sunday dinner.
No. Hey, I wish we were having s'mores, you know what I mean? But that just did not happen.
Right.
One thing though, when it came to food, man, she's Puerto Rican, and I have half brothers actually that are Puerto Rican and like basically German, and it's so much fun. But her rice and beans, out of control, absolutely amazing. She also makes this dish that's like called chicken fricassee, and that's like a Puerto Rican, like almost like a chicken stew. And she was just out here maybe about a month ago, because we're having another baby. I have a 3-year-old son, and my wife is 8 months pregnant right now. We're having a little baby girl that's coming. So the family came out here, and I'm like, Debbie, I was like, you gotta like basically come to the kitchen while you're here, and we're gonna spend like an afternoon, you and I, we're just gonna cook, and we're gonna freeze all this stuff and put it in the freezer. We had a blast, man. She came over, she's like, she's like, when I get into the kitchen, she's like, I gotta have like another t-shirt on because I'm gonna get stuff all over the place. I gotta have my slippers. Like, she had to have her, her little things. And we just had a blast with it. But yeah. But no cookies, no s'mores or anything like that.
It was not the a Little House on the Prairie, so to speak.
No.
For you growing up.
No.
But
just like many other people, it's.
Unfortunately, you're one of many who have experienced tumultuous divorces.
Yeah.
Being in what would be considered kind of upstate, and you talked about working on a farm.
Sure.
Were you in and around farms growing
yeah.
up? And was that any part of your dad's career or your family's industry? Or is that
family's industry? Yes. Dad's career? No. So I was involved in farms, 2 different farms. One, when I was growing up, actually younger, we had a dairy farm in Pennsylvania. So my grandfather, that's a whole other story. So he was not only like a priest and a very big religious figure, but he actually wanted to start a farm, ended up getting with my great uncle. They got a grant from the government to build a dairy farm. And this was like, I want to say this had to have been in the late 70s, right? Early 80s. And man, that farm, I just remember we had wild horses on the property. There was bison down the street. And there were like, who knows how many cows. There had to have been like 40 or 50 cows or something like that. And we're talking like massive structures that you're milking 30 to 40 cows at the same time.
Right.
So there's that farm that I grew up, and that was a very cool experience. We go into that. And then the other farm is actually a really cool story, and I'm still very, very involved with this farm and this family, is the Hepworths. So the Hepworths have a farm in the Hudson Valley that's in Milton, New York, and it's a 7th generation farm. This farm was actually started before we even ended up getting independence in 1776. That's how far their family goes back. And it's just so cool to actually be a part of that, because Amy Hepworth, there's 2 sisters that run the farm right now. They're twins, believe it or not. So you have Amy Hepworth and you have Gail Hepworth. When I was going through all these challenges in high school, the way this all happened, there's a girl that I was really good friends with on the track team. And then her mom was actually partnered with Amy Hepworth. They were doing a lot of organic stuff basically on the farm. They were doing events and stuff like that. And so I would go down the farm every once in a while, and it was just like a very cool experience. And the property sits like right on the Hudson River. It's really, really cool. Anyway, Amy heard about the challenges that I was going through, sat me down and said, hey, if you need a job, I'll give you a job. If you need transportation, I'll give you a truck. If you need a place to live, I'll give you a place to live. And at this time, I was 16 turning 17. And I was like, well, I don't have a place to live. I don't have a job, and I don't have transportation. So this sounds like a great deal, right?
Win-win.
Yeah, win-win. She's like, okay. She was like, I have this house in the woods, right? Kind of like a van down by the river kind of thing. And we'll get you set up in the house. There's electricity, but there's no toilet, right? There's an outhouse. And there's no running water, but we'll get you water down there. And then I'll give you my work truck. Take it when you need it, but I need you working with me and my team on the farm. And so that was a very cool deal. I mean, basically a whole summer I had my own house in the woods, tucked away, where all my friends came. We all hung out, but I made sure I was at work every single day. And what we did is we ended up getting like this, God, I want to say like a 500-yard like water line that was like almost like a fire department hose, right? That went from up top where the water source was all the way through the woods, all the way down to this cabin. And there was like a 500-gallon tank, and that was our water source. And so whenever I wanted to take a bath or anything like that, I'd go out there with my little pot, I'd fill it up, I'd put it on the stove, I'd redo it over and over until we had that bathtub full, and I took a bath. So you can only imagine how many baths I took, right?
4.
Yeah. I mean, I'd honestly go back up to the house. But it was very cool because like the way the property was set, it was kind of like, up top was like nice and flat. And then there was a tree line. And that tree line, we made a trail. And that trail led to the cabin. There was a road that went to the cabin too down below. But this was like the quickest way to get down there. And in New York, what's cool is like every once in a while you find some vines, right, hanging off trees. So, of course, me and a bunch of high school friends, what do? We're like, okay, we found this vine. We're rope swinging. We're like, this is how we get down to the cabin. This is our hangout spot, right? And it was just like an absolute blast. Nighttime on the weekends, we would go down to the river, which was like a 3 to 5 minute walk, a 3 to 5 minute walk. the trains right there. You cross over the tracks, and we had this little spot where we'd have a fire pit, and then there's a rope swing on that tree. It was like the Lost Boys. It was absolutely just the best time ever, right? No parents overseeing anything. But yeah, that was a great time. That did end though at the end of the summer because my mom traveled up and she was just like ended up on the property. I had no idea she was driving up from Pennsylvania, right? And she sees a bunch of like wild teenagers running around. She's like, "What is going on here? You're coming with me." And I was like, "No." And then I ended up back in Pennsylvania.
Have you had the opportunity to go back and talk to your dad about that summer? And where I'm going with this is I'm picturing probably a very close-knit community. Everybody kind of knows everybody.
Oh, yeah.
Was your dad in communication with the woman who owned the farm to kind of get a better idea of what was actually, hey, like, I'm going to offer your son a place to stay. He's going to be good. Or was he completely oblivious to what was going on?
I'm sure there was conversations. The cool thing about this is that actually they went to school. So Amy and Gail went to school with my dad in high school. So he knew them very well. And I'm sure, there were talks that I just wasn't aware of. At the time, too, I was working also as a dishwasher in restaurants like right there in Marlboro. I went to school in this area called Marlboro, New York. And I'm sure word got out. You know what I mean? Because I was hustling, right? And that's another reason why I wasn't playing sports is because nobody was paying for me to buy dinner or when I went to school, how did I get my lunch money? I got my lunch money from washing dishes.
Right.
There was a lot of responsibility that I kind of put on myself at that time. I didn't have to take that route, right? I could have easily gone down to Pennsylvania and just lived with my brother and stuff like that. But I really felt like this needed to be solved. And if this was the journey and path I was going to take, then this is the journey and path I'm going to see through and through.
So was that summer then between junior and senior year or sophomore and junior year?
That was actually sophomore and junior year.
Now, when mom came up to visit, did she make you go back to Pennsylvania for your last 2 years of high school?
So I went down to Pennsylvania and this is a funny story too. So I started school in Downingtown, Pennsylvania. Downingtown is, maybe 45 minutes from Philadelphia. And so I get in this school and I know absolutely nothing, right? I know nobody. My brother does, he's played like football there and stuff like that. But for me, it was like, a foreign country. And I was just like super bummed out. And so here's Jason again, trying to figure this out, right? So I'm like, I don't want to go to this school. I'm like, how do I get back up to New York? In the meantime, I got to figure this out because I don't want to go to school. My brother at the time was dating this girl that her whole family was homeschooled, right? And even the girl that he was dating, which was probably 16, 17 years old, very cool family. She was being homeschooled. So we would go to school and then we come back and she was just chilling at home all day. I'm like, I want to do that. So I'm like, I start like learning like how they're doing this, right? In this house. And then I pitch my brother. I'm like, dude, we should do this, right? So we're like, how are we going to tell mom? Like, how are we going to convince her? And so we come up with this whole plan on how it's better for us to be homeschooled while my mom's working like 24/7. Like at that time, she was working for Smith, Klein and Beckman as a project manager, which I think was like acquired by LabCorp back in the day. But anyway, she was 9 to 5. You know what I mean? She wasn't really around. Somehow we influenced her decision to allow us to homeschool us at home, where we just got our curriculum and we just studied the books that we never actually studied. Right. So that was that first year back. So now we're in junior year and that's what's happening in junior year. So that we go through a whole year of that. And I'm just like, I got to go back up to New York. I got to solve this. Right. I ended up convincing my dad that I was ready to work this out. And he basically convinced Debbie that let's give this a try. Right. And I ended up moving in with them for the last year of my senior year. And junior year is when that accident happened, right? So it happened during that period, basically the junior to senior year. So there was, I'm trying to remember exactly that timeline, but I think it was like maybe halfway through the junior, I ended up back in New York. But the accident happened, and then I knew things had to change, and I never wanted to go in the military, but I knew I wanted to go to the med school. And there was this 3x5 card that ended up in my mailbox, like thousands of other kids in junior high across America, right? And I'm like reading this thing, and it was actually from the Navy, and I was like, it's like, are you interested in these types of careers, right? And it would like, law enforcement, like whatever it was, and it said medical. I'm like, whoa, what's this all about? I had no idea, right? Because at this point, even though the family's been in the military for generations, right? There was no like talk about it really. There was no like influencing kind of like my brother and I to do it. So I had no idea. I didn't know that there were two sides of the military. I didn't know there was an officer side and a enlisted side. I didn't find that until I was actually in, which is a disaster. If I would have known that, things would be a lot different today. But anyway, check a little box, medical, right? After the accident, two guys show up at the door, and my dad's like, what is this about? And I'm like, don't worry about it. We're just talking about like maybe opportunities, So they left. And then my dad and my stepmother was like, really? Like, tell us more about that. And I'm like, no, there's not really much. I just wanted to see if this might be an option. I'm not really interested, and they left it, right? What I did is I didn't want anyone to know what I was thinking. And so I went up to Albany. I took my ASVAB test and basically passed it with flying colors, didn't study at all. And they were like, you pretty much do whatever you want in the Navy. What do you want to do? And I was like, I want to go to medical. And they're like, all right, well, the best option is for you to become a hospital corpsman. But it was so funny because if you look at the way corpsman is spelled, it's spelled like corpsman. So when I was telling all my friends what I was going to do, I was like, I'm going to be a hospital corpsman. It was so bad. Like, I look back at this and I'm like, oh my goodness, I just like jumped into this and like, I didn't know anything, right? So anyway.
Did you ever consider any of the other branches, or once you focused got that card from the Navy, that was it?
That was it. I didn't know. I didn't think about going to the Army and saying like what did they have to offer like in medical. I didn't think about going to the Air Force and saying like what to see what their program was. I mean, I was just going with my gut. Like at this point, it's like almost like, in life, like, you almost like manifest things and things show up, right? I don't know if you're a believer in that, but I'm a believer in that. And maybe that's what happened here, right? It was something I was looking for, and it shows up in my mailbox, and it led us to like where I am today. And anyway, so here I am, senior year. Family's like, what are you going to do? I'm like, I'm going to go to community college, right? And then I'll transfer. And, but I'm still like, I have no money. I still don't know how I'm going to do this, but like, I'm like, this could lead me. I'm like, I always tell whenever somebody asks me like, how did your career start? I'm like, well, look, I was like, when I was about 17, 18 years old, I couldn't like dedicate my time to a girl, let alone a career, right? I had an idea what I wanted to do. I had no idea where I was going, right? So anyway, ended up going that route. I went to Albany, ASVAB. Now I know that this is what I'm going to do. Didn't tell the parents, didn't tell my mom, didn't tell my dad, didn't tell the grandparents, didn't tell my brother, didn't tell anybody. And then went to graduation, and they didn't expect me to graduate because I was living on my own for a while, except for like basically my senior year, the last half of the senior year. And I probably skipped like 60 days of school. And the reason why was because I wanted to snowboard. So snowboard, it was like basically in my head at that time in my life, I was like, either I'm going to be a professional snowboarder or I'm going to med school, one or the other. And then, of course, I chose medical because I was like the more logical step to take.
The Navy recruiters hadn't convinced you to go delayed entry?
No, not at all. Like, recruiters are recruiters. It's like, man, they just want to get you in. You're a number.
So after you took your ASVAB and they basically said you could do whatever you want.
Yeah.
Did you still instinctively just kind of put it on the back burner and like, if I want to come back around to it, I will?
No, at that time I actually made the decision. This is what I'm going to do.
Okay.
Because the accident happened before that. So it was like, going back to the question, what really kind of influenced your why, it was the accident that like really catapulted it, because I always knew what I wanted to do. I really wanted to get into healthcare, right? And to help people. And when that accident happened, I was at a point that I could help somebody and I couldn't help somebody.
Right.
And basically I told myself that I would never be in that position again. And if I were, I would be a lot more educated on how to manage and handle that situation. So graduation happens. I walk across the stage, and mind you, this is the first time my mom and my dad, my actual biological mom, my biological dad, were at the same place at the same time since like 4th or 5th grade.
Oh, wow.
So it's been years. So anyway, even we go outside. No one thought I was going to graduate because I skipped so many days of school. There's a whole story to that one and how I got over that one and how I was able to walk across stage.
Did you cheat?
No, I'm telling you, I always try to figure things out, right? Long story short, my stepmother always used to get migraines, right? And so, I was like, I need to come up with a medical reason why I skipped all these days of school, right? And I'm like, when she has migraines, she's really sensitive to light, and she usually stays home for a day or two, depending. And this could happen multiple times a month. And I'm like, maybe if I start going to the doctor and tell him I have migraines and these are my symptoms, I get something in writing that shows that I have migraines, give that to the principal, and then let me off and let me walk. And so that's what I did.
So you cheated.
Yeah, I guess you could say that, right? Like, I was just figuring it out. I was being creative with it.
You adapted and overcome.
I adapted and overcame. And to be honest with you, even when I came up to the principal with this, because they were like, Jay, we're not going to let you walk. And once I had proof, it was proof, right? Because I was basically tracking over 6 months, like going to these doctor's appointments to make sure that I was like, this isn't just like a one visit thing, right? And he was like, we understand. We're not sure if we can still let you walk. This is what we'll do. If you get a letter from each of your teachers, right, on why you should walk, and they all sign off on it, then we'll let you walk. But there's a catch. You will have to go to summer school, right? If not everybody agrees. And I was like, give me a challenge? Fine, let's go, right? And my grades were not bad at all. Like, I was still getting 94s, 97s, 92s, some classes, maybe 88. Like, you know what I mean? It wasn't horrible. So anyway, get all my teachers to sign off, except one.
There's always one.
Phys ed. Physical education. That was the one teacher that would not sign it off. So here it is. I could walk across stage, but I have to go to summer school, and I'm actually basically deploying to boot camp on August 25th. So I thought I was going to have the whole summer after school to hang with friends and family and all that stuff, get it all out of my system, and then I'm off. Nope.
This goes back
Jason
to
had to go to school.
This goes back to me trying to clarify this.
Yeah.
So you can't enlist until you're 18.
Yes.
But you went and talked to the recruiter in your junior year. I'm assuming that you're not 18 at that point.
No.
What I'm getting to is, where does the sign on the dotted line happen, and you still able, because you can't have your parents involved in it if you're not 18.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the thing is that's a great question, actually. It's good that I can tell you're a cop. This goes back a little bit. So I was always 1 year older than everyone else. And that's how I was able to do this.
Got it. So in your junior year, you turned 18.
The reason being is that there's a story to this too, is that when we were younger, I had actually like a speech, not like maybe like a speech impediment, not impediment. Like I had a hard time of like saying certain letters, right? Pronouncing certain letters. And my brother, we're actually Irish twins. We're 11 months apart.
Just so you know, for anybody who's been listening already, you say water funny.
Yeah. No, I know. Everyone's like, say water, say orange, say bagels. Yeah. No, I understand. Well, I'm also from New York. But anyway, so we're basically a year apart, right? I think it was easier for my mom, to be honest with you, if we're like in the same grade. And so there was something called readiness that was between kindergarten and first grade. So basically, if anyone needed a little bit more before they got to first grade, they went into readiness. And that's what I did. So my mom put me in readiness. And then by the time we got to first grade, we were both in first grade at that point. Right. So that's why later down the line, I was able to make those, like, sign the dotted line and so forth. But
and you graduated what year?
1998.
And did your summer school and off to Navy boot camp in August.
Yeah. August 25th. Yeah.
When do you finally tell your family that you're heading off to boot camp? Are you at least nice to them and not tell them the day before you're shipping out?
No, I actually told them students. So going back to the story, when I walked across stage, everyone was surprised that I even was able to do that. Got outside, and then the parents are there for the first time since, forever and ever. I said, "Hey guys,
this is a perfect time to tell you.
I got something to tell you." And they're like, "What? What's going on?" I was like, "Join the Navy. I'm leaving in August." And they're like, "What?" They're like, "What is going on?" And it's really interesting because the way that played out was, obviously my mom was like scared, right? She didn't show it right away, but like I could tell she was scared. And then on my dad's side, like all of a sudden I get like automatic respect, like that really tough relationship and everything like that, just like almost overnight changed. I mean, it didn't change immediately. Like it did take a lot of healing. It did take a lot of like relationship building. Same thing with my stepmother. You know what I mean? But it was very surprising to see how quickly attitudes changed or the way people perceive you, because they knew, like, if you think about it, they were like, this guy did all this stuff and didn't tell anyone. Like, well, wait a second, hold on. Let's talk about this. Like, yes, he did.
Were you the first in your family to represent the Navy, or had all the other branches kind of been represented at that point?
No, the branches in the family were Army and Air Force. So my grandfather was Army, started out, and that's an interesting story because when he came over to Ellis Island, basically he was like leaving the war, right? Because he was like 18, 19. And when he got here, he went directly into the military to get his citizenship. They find out that he speaks 5 languages, right? He speaks Russian, speaks German, Polish, Ukrainian, English. They send him right back over. So like, here he is trying to leave this chaos and then becomes a citizen of the United States, and they send him directly back over. And then he ended up being, he was like a translator for one of the commanders or something like that. So he just like followed them along. He also started as a medic. And then once they started figuring out what he could really do and provide, that was his job. And there was a point in his career where he left the Army and then joined the Air Force. And then he ended up retiring Air Force. And then he ended up working within the government at West Point for 20 years. And my grandfather, like that guy, everyone thinks like he was some kind of co-op intelligence. There was something going on with Opa that no one ever understood, but always was curious. Like, you go to the house and there's this tower in the backyard that's like 40 feet popping out of these trees. You go into the basement and he had his like little room, had a little heater, had the furnace burner and stuff like that. And then he had all his radios. And then whenever you went down there, when he came back from work, or he came back from fishing, because that's pretty much all he did. He like either he was working or he's fishing or he was on that radio talking whatever language he was speaking. It was never English. And so like the uncles are pretty convinced that there is something going on in the back end. And he was very secretive, very, very quiet guy. Also obviously like very, very intelligent.
Sometimes wondering about the stories is better than knowing the actual story.
Yeah, no, I know. It like your mind just goes wild, right? Like I can't tell you the rabbit holes like my Uncle Roy has gone down, like trying to figure this out. I think my Uncle Brian's been trying to do the same thing. You know what I mean? It's been and now it's like, you know, with genealogy and everything like that, it's like obviously we're all like giving our spit and blood to anyone to figure the story out, right? And the plan is to go back over there because like, you know, our family comes from the Carpathian Mountains, which is like the south west side of Ukraine, which that border always changed during the wars, right? So it was like it might have been Poland at one point, Ukraine at another point, Russia at another point. And that's why he knew so many languages, because when he was growing up, you had to, right? It just really depended on what country they were that day. You know, it's pretty wild. But when
instead of uniform of the day, it's language of the day.
Language of the day, man. But if it wasn't for him leaving and then basically getting sent back over, my grandmother and him would have never met. My grandmother was from Germany, Eastern Germany. And so they ended up meeting, and I don't know that exact story how they met. But when they did meet, he was stationed in Frankfurt. And that's where they had my two first uncles, my Uncle Walter and Uncle Roy. And that's really cool. And then like, obviously they came back, landed, you know, in the Hudson Valley. He also worked at like Stewart Air Force Base, the base right there. It used to be the Air Force. Now it's like Stewart International Airport or something like that. But my grandmother, man, to both of them, the accents were so thick, you know, it was pretty cool. But great people. Fun story.
So then moving you forward, what was it like getting into boot camp and that reality check?
Slap in the face, man. I had no idea what I was getting into. I knew it was going to be tough.
When it comes to sunglasses, first responders and military members definitely don't baby them. They get dropped, thrown in a utility pocket, or tossed in gear bags. Frontline Optics was created for that reality. You get premium eye protection without paying designer brand prices for something that won't survive your lifestyle. From polarized UV 400 lenses to anti-reflective coatings and water-repellent finish. And here's where Frontline Optics separates themselves from the pack. When life happens and your glasses break, they offer a no-questions-asked replacement program, even for prescription lenses. On top of that, Frontline Optics was founded by a firefighter, and a portion of every purchase goes to support the First Responders Children's Foundation, helping families of those who gave everything. So if you're looking for sunglasses that look good and come from a company that actually understands the job, visit frontlineoptics.com and use the promo code TRANSITION10 to get 10% off your purchase. Frontline Optics, from a first responder for the front lines.
And it wasn't like obviously Marine Corps, SOI, or anything like that. But it was just a complete different reality. That's all. You know, I remember just taking a lot of deep breaths. I remember like people like turning around and telling me, Brooks, stop breathing down my back. I'm like, bro, I'm just trying to breathe. I'm trying to like relax. Like this place is crazy. Like, I don't know. And like, I was someone that did not listen to people, right? I always forged my own path. And now here I'm in a place that I have to, right? So that was a big reality check for me. And I knew I was going to have to go down that path, but I knew what was at the end of the tunnel too. I knew this was going to actually get me to, A school, which was Corps school. And I knew that from there I'd get into a duty station. And the plan was, you always have a plan.
Not you.
The whole thing always gets diverged. But the plan was, you know, as soon as I got whatever that first duty station was, I was going to start working on my undergrad and then have my master's done by the time I got out, basically preparing myself to get everything ready to go to med school, right? And the plan worked almost. Like it almost worked. And then there was something that was called OIF1 that put a wrench into things. Operation Iraqi Freedom. Not in a bad way, just a different way. So it was first duty station, Portsmouth Naval Hospital. Perfect. Great. First job working in pediatrics. Yes. Love it. Working with kids. So much fun. And then did that for a year, and then really wanted to get into emergency medicine, and found the opportunity, got down to the ER and worked in the ER. And I was going to school. I was going to school full time. I had a time job as a lifeguard, and then I was working in the ER. And I was actually, the ER, the way it works is like, you either get nights or you get days. And if you're new and you're nobody like me at that time, which was like an E2, E3, I got nights, right? And so I would work from 7 at night to 7 in the morning. I would start class from 9 on campus in Norfolk, from 9 to 4 p.m. And then I would go home, and then I would go back to work at 7. And I'd work from 7 at night to 7 in the morning. And I would do that 3 days in a row. And then you get 2 days off. And then you work for 2 days and you get 3 days off. And that was kind of the rotation. But talk about a grueling schedule, and you're studying chemistry, right? You're studying biology. Biology always came easy. Chemistry was, for some reason, so tough, which never made sense to me. I was like, I love math, and chemistry is kind of like math and science together, But yeah, that was, everything was working great. And then, even before Iraq happened, I was planning like next duty station. All right, you have to do in the Navy, you have to do, basically time with the blue side and time with the green side, right? Well, on the blue side, I already had that done, right? That was a naval hospital. On the green side, you could either go overseas, or you have to basically, go on a ship, or you have to be with Marines, right? And
is this all still your first enlistment?
This is my first enlistment, yeah. And I had no idea that you could go with the Marines, to be honest with you. I always just like, I didn't know there was enlisted in officers, right? No one came and told me this stuff, and I guess I just didn't read about it, And then, so I was just thinking, okay, well, if I have to go on a ship, and here's Jay trying to figure it out again. I don't want to go on a ship. How do I not go on a ship? And they're like, well, you could go overseas. And I was like, perfect. I'll go overseas. That's great. So I'll just go to the Naval Hospital overseas. Done. And I could keep on taking my classes. I'll finish my undergrad. I'll have that prepared, and I'll start applying to med school. Awesome. Great. Then I got orders, and those orders said Camp Pendleton, California. I was like, where is Camp Pendleton? What is this? And what? Marines? I didn't know I could be stationed with the Marines. Oh, man. It was just like one of those moments again, But yeah, it was.
Where were you at on 9/11?
Pretty cool. I'll tell you exactly. Do you remember exactly where you were?
I was sitting in my bedroom because I was getting ready to go to work.
Yeah.
I remember I was a detective at that time, and I had to be to work at 8 o'clock. And I remember, 6:45, whatever, 7 o'clock, finishing, getting ready. You flip the TV on just to have something noise in the background.
Right.
And they started talking about it.
What did, when you first saw it being televised, what were the first things that ran through your mind?
I remember when it came on, the first plane had already crashed into it, because obviously the time difference.
Yeah.
So you're just sitting there going, you're still kind of in that bewilderment thing, like, holy Jesus, that's a huge fire.
Right.
I had at that time, an uncle and a cousin who were affiliated with the fire department in New York. So I immediately started thinking about them, like, I wonder if they're working that. Having been, in Manhattan many times, you just thinking about what the impact of a fire like that in the city is doing.
Yeah.
But not thinking anything more than just the building on fire, and then seeing the second plane hit. And I remember in my head going, today's going to be different. Today is not going to be the same. And you go into work, and obviously West Coast, a smaller LA County Police Department, so we really didn't have a lot of connection to it. And there was already a sense of, okay, what in our city could possibly be an issue? How can we be of a service to any other cities or within the county? So there was immediately a sense of something's different.
Yeah. Yeah. So to your question, where were you? Do you remember? I absolutely remember. I was in the chow hall getting breakfast because we're on the same time zone. And when it first, like, same thing, like there was the building that was on fire and they were just, one of the towers. And where my head was at, like, this is not real. Like, I totally did not. I was just like in denial in my head. And then I continued to watch it. And the first thing was like, I got to call my dad, because he was, we did business in the city. And when I was a kid, we would always take the Metro North down. And he had a side hustle. So his business originally, he was a distributor of Coca-Cola. And we would distribute, I would work with him. My brother and I would work with him in the summertime. And we would distribute like soda down in West Point to all the cadets and stuff like that. But the side hustle was gold and jewelry. So during the weekends, we would go down to the city. We'd take the Metro North down, get off in Grand Central, go to the Gold District. And my dad would be like, all right, boys, here you go. $20 for you, Nate. $20 for you, Jay. Meet me back here in 3 hours. We didn't have phones once again. Like, we didn't have any of that stuff. And, we were seriously, like, at that time, like 9, 10, 11, just running around the city. Like, But anyway, when it happened, that was the first thing. I was like, I really hope he's not down there right now. And so made sure that he was safe, called a bunch of friends, make sure they were safe. I'm sure you're from New York, so like, I'm sure you might have some contacts back there and you were doing the same thing. I had
trying to get through.
Yeah. I had a lot of my friends that were with me in high school, they were now firefighters. And because their dad was a chief of the fire department in Staten Island, and I knew that everybody was getting called in, right? So I was like trying to chime in, and I'm sure everybody was calling them. It was just like absolute chaos. But that's where I was. I was at the chow hall having breakfast, and it was definitely like an oh shit moment. And then when that happened, the next thing was, we're definitely going over there. Without even like knowing, like I'm like, I don't know when this is gonna happen, but it's gonna happen, And it's interesting when there was a lot of like, I feel like after the moment, because you had Bush that was there, and he was like reading, a story or books to like the kids. It was like a classroom with kids and stuff like that, and a lot of people criticized him for not reacting with a sense of urgency, maybe, that like everybody kind of expected. But I look back at it now with, all that I know in my experience, it's like in times that are challenging and times of war, you have to be very even keeled. You have to be like, the worst thing that you could do is all of a sudden jump. So I look back at that, I'm like, I don't know why people are criticizing for that. You know what I mean?
Well, the other aspect too is that there's the ability to look back with hindsight.
Yeah.
That, hey, he didn't move, or what's perceived as moving quickly enough.
Right.
The other thing too is, and this goes into the conspiracy theory aspect, but there's the one side of it that the government was well aware that something was coming.
Right.
And so you'd make the argument then as the president, he should have at least been thinking about maybe something would have happened.
Right.
But let's take the other side of it.
Yeah.
Let's take it as we didn't really know what was going to happen.
Right.
Yes, we've had a plane impact the Twin Towers. As the president, what's he supposed to do? Immediately jump up and go, okay, I'm just trying to play a little bit of devil's advocate here of, all right, keep you posted on it, guys. I'm going to keep hanging out with these kids.
I mean, how much can you do at that moment?
Right?
It's like, you're not going to press the button, right? So anyway, but yeah, that was, I knew, and at that moment, right, like we didn't know what was going to go on, but we were going to go in training basically for the 31st MEU, because Camp Pendleton, where we're at, I was with 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines.
So you were already assigned to the Marines at this point?
I was already assigned to the Marines at this point. And 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines, very similar to like 2-5, is there also some of the most decorated. It is the most decorated, basically, regiment in the Marine Corps. Look up the history. It's very, very cool. Battles of the Bulge, like major like battles. They've always been kind of there, the first ones there. But right away, obviously, we started training. The 31st MEU was already planned, so that had nothing to do with it. But did a South Pacific tour, very cool. Got to basically travel all around Asia when we didn't have money as kids that young, to see these awesome, amazing things. Like we were in Okinawa for 6 months on base, and we learned a lot of cool stuff. Like, what is Mojo? I don't know if you know what Mojo is, but over there, Mojo is, I was
gonna say, in the slang term.
It's a drink.
Okay.
Right. And so like when you step off like Camp Hansen in Okinawa, there's like just like one main street right across gate, and it has like restaurants and bars. That's it. Right. There's probably more bars than restaurants. And Mojo is just like, honestly, it's pretty much anything in the sink, right? And is in this thing, and it tastes like fruit punch, and it's just like, it's the worst thing for you. We learned about yokosaba, or what is it called? It's a yakisoba, chicken yakisoba, which is like a noodle chicken dish over there that we ate all the time. Just very cool experience, right? And then from there, that was kind of like home base. And then when we get like deployed on the ship, when the MEU was moving, we went to, Thailand. We trained with the Thai Marines, and I was with Weapons Company. So I was a senior corpsman, just to back up. So I was what they called a senior corpsman for Weapons Company, which is basically like the lead corpsman that oversaw the corpsman for the entire company, which is the responsibility is like 120 Marines, give or take, during wartime or not, And then I had my corpsmen that were a part of like different platoons within the company. So you had like javelins, you had 81s, you had this and you had that. So yeah, we trained over there. We went to Korea, trained in the up in the mountains with the South Korean Marines. There's only been 2 times in my life that I've been the coldest in my life. One, the mountains of Korea, right? Where you're sleeping in a tent, 2-man tent, and you open that thing, you can see the heat come out. Like, it is that cold. It is like, you cannot sleep. You're doing basically push-ups and jumping jacks just to wait till the sun comes up. It was like brutal. And then Kuwait too. Like, we were dead of the winter, February in Kuwait, and that was brutally cold, believe it or not, too. I mean, the desert, But yeah, so did that, traveled, where else? We went to Hong Kong. First time that found out that you could actually order a beer at McDonald's. We thought that was really cool. But yeah, it was very, very awesome. And then when we came back, it was like the plan was made, like what we were going to do. Right. So it was like immediate training. And I can't remember exactly how much time it was by the time we got from the 31st MEU to the time we were in garrison to the time we actually deployed to Kuwait. It had to have been a year or maybe less than a year. But there is, a whole workup that we had to do. There was a lot of training that I had to make sure that the Marines were actually prepared. So the way I always train my Marines medically is that, when you have a platoon of guys and you have your sergeants that are leading fire teams and so forth, it's like every fire team had to have somebody that was the expert, the SME medically for trauma. So we were like training all these guys. We were doing a ton of training. We're doing a bunch of marches, forced marches with gas masks on. And like we would run up to the helo pad and back in gas masks, which was not easy. You're running uphill in gas masks. It was just brutal. Anyway, it all helped at the end. But,
Did you ever have that moment where you're thinking about, My damn recruiters never told me this part of the corpsman job.
They didn't even tell me that they were like, I could have became an officer. Like, hey, listen, you know what? There's a better route. You get paid more. You just got to go to college first. Like, okay, I would have done that. You know, it's like.
Now, following in my mind, kind of just a mental calendar.
Right.
Is this pushing right up to the end of your first enlistment, or are you getting basically stop lost and mandatory extended, or did you decide to?
So the way this works is, becoming a corpsman, the contracts are different than a lot of the other contracts.
Okay.
Typically contracts always 4 years, right? So you're for like an 0311 with the Marine Corps, or if you're 8404, like whatever the case is, it's those, most of them are 4 years, but with the corpsman, you have to do 5. And the reason is because the first year is pretty much training. So
got it. You
come out of boot camp, you go to A school. A school, I'm trying to remember what it was. I think it was like maybe 6 months. And that's where you're doing all the anatomy, physiology, all those courses. And then you actually head down at that time. Corps school was up in Chicago and Great Lakes, Illinois. It's no longer there. It's Texas. And then you
just basically graduated boot camp and stayed there and started A school?
Yeah, exactly. And until we finished that, and then we got shipped down to Jacksonville, North Carolina. And that's where we learned like our trauma training, like how to deal with like mass casualties and so forth. But yeah, that was kind of like the workup in the training to go through all that stuff.
Is any of this changing your mind and your original plan of
med school? No, it was not at all. Actually, so all this stuff is happening and I'm still dead set. Like here I am at Camp Pendleton with the Marines, and I was still trying to figure out how to go to school, finish school, because basically I almost got 2 years done under the books when I was at the hospital. And then once I got to the, with the Marines, I was trying to figure out where to fit it in the schedule. And when we went on that MU, there was actually college courses and we had time on the MU. So I was able to fit a bunch more classes in, but I wasn't able to finish the latter 2 years of
I was going to say undergrad and grad in 5 years. That's a big
aggressive
piece of pie to try to eat.
Yeah, I tend to be a little aggressive. I set the goals, I don't always hit them, but like I get there eventually, right? It kind of like lights a fire under me a little bit. But yeah, so wasn't able to get the undergrad done, but like my officers knew, my chief medical officers, we had 2 guys that were freaking amazing. And they knew exactly what I wanted to do. So they were at that point, they were actually giving some of the courses on the ship, which helped me build that relationship even better. And they were like, if you want to go to USIS, we'll get you in USIS. USIS is the medical school in the Navy. Thing was, I wasn't sure if I wanted to stay with the Navy, right? I did want to do med school, but I had this issue with the military that just because of rank, you could basically command anyone underneath you of lesser rank. And I ran into a lot of issues with that because I had younger officers that would put Marines at risk with decisions that they were making. And just because I was an E4 and they were an O2, they outranked me by far, and we just had to run with it. And if someone got injured, it was like both our responsibilities, but they didn't have to listen to me. I could guide them, So I was like, man, I don't know if I want to go this route with the Navy, but I was still going to go with it. I was still going to I was like, this is the best route I got. Right. And they also said, if you decide to get out, we'll support you there too. You know what I mean? We'll once you finish school and you're applying to med school and whatever that path looks like, we'll support you. So the plan was kind of working, right? I was getting there. And then Iraq happened. And, we were on the initial push. We were in Kuwait, kind of like, if everybody kind of remembers this, everyone remembers Ukraine, and everybody remembers watching on TV, Russia coming on the borders of Ukraine and setting up. And I remember watching the news, and it was like stating that, yeah, we're not sure where this is going to go, Like they could invade Ukraine, they might not. And I'm like, shut up. No one's moving that much if they're not going to invade, right? And so that was the same thing back in Iraq, right? And or Iraq. So we got to Kuwait in February. All the movement. And that was a crazy story because like
February 03.
This is February 03. So this is before, anything started. But we were piling up just like Russia was piling up with Ukraine, right? Like right on the LOD. We call it LOD, line of departure. And so here we are, right? Where, if I remember correctly, we went to the Andrew Air Force Base and we're basically getting on planes, commercial planes, completely geared up with everything, right? Except like, our back, like all the heavy gear, right? That was stored below. But here I am, headed to a war. I have my 9mm on me. I have my M16. I have my K-bar. And I'm on a commercial flight. And I'm like, this doesn't feel right. I'm on a plane with a loaded rifle. But there's also like 300 of us on that plane with loaded rifles. Like, you know what I mean? It was a wild moment.
There were unique civilian airplanes that were commandeered, so to speak. They might have still been American or United, but they were military planes at that point.
Oh, for sure. I mean, we have to go into the radar somehow, right? But yeah, that was pretty crazy. So that kind of put a little stop in med school at that moment. A little something called war.
I was going to say, you had other things to worry about.
Yeah, apparently that was a priority.
How long was that deployment?
8 months, just about. So give or take, I was actually a part of the stop loss guys because my contract was supposed to end in August, right? Because I started in August, supposed to end in August. And, so we pushed all the way to Baghdad. We go all the way to Tikrit, which is where we got intel that Saddam was there. And I'll never forget that because we're in the Hummers, and then we're in tracks. Like our weapons has like your javelins. Those guys were in Hummers. We were in the tracks where I always rolled with the 81s, which are mortars, large mortars. And I remember like going up to the airport where we heard that we got this intel, and like from afar, I'm like, what is that? And I couldn't figure it out. Like there was like under a tree line, which was, the palm trees all over the place over there. But it was like a little off. It was like weird. It was like I couldn't make it out exactly what it was, but something was definitely there. We get closer, and it's freaking MiG-9s under cami netting. And I'm like, the Russians were selling jets to Iraq. I was like, you're a kid. You don't know this stuff. Like, obviously, everybody, your commander.
Huge eye opener for you.
Yeah, I was like, what is going on here? I mean, even the cache, the weapons caches that we were falling on, all of it was like old, like Russian, weaponry and rifles and all that stuff. We even found some old German, like Lugers. One of my guys accidentally shot his hand with one because he was an idiot, playing around with it and didn't know where the safety was, and trigger went off. And this guy injured himself twice before we even really got into the war. I'm like, bro, come on. We got to keep you healthy, man. You're making this a challenge for me.
You're making me work too hard.
Yeah.
How was that when you think back of being able to evaluate your time? Young kid, call you somebody who bucked the system, gets into the Navy, spending the first year or so, year and a half at a naval hospital in Virginia.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden you're assigned to Marine. So you get to see the complete polar opposites of being in the military and then ultimately in the Navy. Did you find that you liked one side more than the other?
I mean, at the end of the day, believe it or not, like I would have never said this before going in the military, or even when I was at the hospital. But now looking back at everything, to me is like 3-5. Everything, they're my brothers. We still keep in touch every Memorial Day, and you're invited to come. We always do the hike up for Sergeant's Hill, which is on base on San Mateo. It's on the San Clemente side. And what it is just like, basically you used to go there if you were punished, more or less. It is a brutal hill to climb. There are some parts where there's like ropes and stuff like that to like, you know, you're basically climbing up in all fours. And as soon as you feel like you're at this plateau, it's like you met that level.
There's
There's
more.
another one. And this usually there's another one. It's just like it totally mind F's you, but and then at the very, very top, basically we have crosses up there. And we have crosses of all the guys that we lost in Iraq and Afghanistan for 3-5. So we always pay respect. There's a bench up there that's a blue bench, and that bench is for all the corpsmen that have passed. On March 25th, 2003, we got in our first firefight. It was one of the worst ones. I wouldn't say the worst. It was pretty bad. But what happened was we were going up Route 1, and we're still at the bottom. We haven't hit Baghdad yet. So we're still pretty much at the bottom. And all of a sudden, you know, the way the tracks are, they have these doors, right, that open up, and you could like stand and kind of see and get some fresh air and stuff like that. Because when everything's closed up, it's like you just smell diesel, right? So the doors are open and like your head's out, and then all of a sudden we just see RPGs flying across, and we go into like immediately, typically what a battalion will do is they'll go into like this fishbone like position. And there's other positions that tactically like, you know, units will go into, and we didn't know what the hell was going on, right? We just know like shit's about to go down, get the F ready, right? So anyway, that got cleared up and they were moving again. We're like, what the hell happened? We end up finally getting stationed, you know, off somewhere with the whole battalion. They have a whole like battalion meeting of like what exactly happened. We finally got intel, and RPGs came across. There were 2 guys that got severely injured. One unfortunately was Michael Jackson, HM3 Michael Jackson, which was one of my docs. Unfortunately, he was actually, like I was saying before, I was a senior corpsman for weapons company, and then he was actually working at the hospital Camp Pendleton. He wasn't even supposed to be with us, but because we needed extra guys and support, he was pulled from the hospital and he got placed with me. First corpsman that passed during the war happened to be him. So when you go up and you climb up for Sergeant's Hill, on the blue bench is a big thing that says HM3 Johnson up there. And we always pay respects to that.
You said you got stop lost. And so when you get back from that deployment, does the way it work, you're basically, hey, we're going to keep you here as long till we no longer need you per se. Your deployment's going to end. You're going to go back home. Is it then immediately, hey, see ya?
I was just having this conversation the other day. Yeah, pretty much. So, you know, I was part of the stop loss guys. The cool thing about it was not cool leaving your min, right? Because you're leaving before everybody else. So there's a little thing, this feeling like guilt, you know what I mean? Even though you really want to go back home, right? But when I was going out with everybody else, we actually passed the Tower of Babel, which is the actual Tower of Babel, which who gets to see that, right? And like growing up with my grandfather being a pastor or a priest, like, you know, we were both sides of the family are very religious. I always read those stories, you know, and it was just so cool. So I took a picture, brought that back, showed my grandfather, and that was just like a very cool story. But once we got back, pretty much it was like a month. They pretty much processed us out about 4 weeks. And then you were basically out. You just went from, you know, patrolling the streets of Diwania and Baghdad and Tikrit and all that stuff in firefights. And then all of a sudden you're going to community college at Saddleback Community College at, you know, 23, 24 years old, trying to get in student government. And they're basically declining you to come in for whatever reason. And you're just like, mother effer, do you know what I did for this goddamn country? And you're saying, I can't join the team.
Was there ever the conversation in the mirror of maybe I don't get out, maybe I do stay in?
No. I was always going to get out. It was kind of an authority thing. I was like, how can you run a successful organization when you might have smarter people that could make better decisions, and you don't give them that opportunity just because of a number. You know, I was just like, I don't want to be a part of that. I mean, I look back now and I'm like, maybe it would have been a better idea. Maybe if I stayed in, went to USIS and became a surgeon or something like that, but that would be a completely different life.
Had you been in San Diego long enough to establish, I'll call it a civilian life?
No, our civilian life meant like whenever we had time off, we would go down to San Diego, go to like Gaslamp, right? Or, you know, we would go up to LA or something like that. We would meet friends here and there, but like, no, absolutely not.
Were you living off base or on base?
On base. Yeah. So that's another interesting story. I was living on base, but I figured out how to actually get BAH while I was on base. And I lived in something they called the crack houses. The crack houses were basically condemned buildings that were about to be like condemned because of probably lead in the paint and all the above, right? That you shouldn't have anyone be living there. But for those that were married, it was like a place where people could stay on base because maybe their wives were too far away. And then you got your own room and all that stuff. Somehow I was able to convince the command, even though I wasn't married, that I should live off base. And I didn't have to live off base. I'd rather live on base in the crack houses because I didn't have to pay rent, but I could collect the BAH. So
work the system.
you just got to figure it out, man. You got to figure it out. You know, that helped me like when I was over in Iraq because like, you know, the money that we got and stuff like that, you know, that was all tax free. But you know, there's a story that I got to tell about war, right? And this is a story that is not really told. And it's like preparing for war. And the reason why I want to tell this story is because a lot of people, when I tell it, they just don't know. So I don't know if it's like this in the Navy. I don't know if it's like this in the Air Force or the Special Forces or with the Navy SEALs or with whoever it might be. But for infantry units in the Marine Corps, you know, once the orders come out that you are going to be deployed and we're going to go into an active war zone, what they do, at least for their battalion, 5th Marines, they did this. I don't know if it's across like all regiments, whatnot, but they're like, here's a piece of paper. And we're like, what is this for? They're like, get a pen. We're like, okay, we have everybody there. All right, guys, we're going to take 1 hour. This is what I want you to do. Write down on this piece of paper everything that you ever wanted to tell your mom, everything you ever wanted to tell your father. You're going to write 2 letters, one to your mother, one to your father, because there is a good chance that you're not coming back. And that was a tough letter to write, you know? And so looking back at it now, it's like, I know the reason why they did that, because they need to make sure that our mindsets are in there, right? Like, we're going to give it our all. So when that was happening, it was such a crazy part of life, because when I was writing it, I basically convinced myself, like, that's true. I'm not coming back. I will fight tooth and nail until I'm, you know, somebody's, you know, I have somebody's arms in my arms. Like, something's going to happen, but there's a very good chance I'm definitely not coming back. Because you've never been to war. You don't know. You know, you did a lot of training, but that's it, right? So anyway, that was very interesting. The cool story about that is obviously I came back, and all my guys came back except one. And I'm very grateful for that. And what's very interesting about this story is that when I did come back and I had 2 arms and I had 2 legs, a lot of people didn't. I said, I think I have to start like evaluating my life choices. I think I'm making some bad decisions. I was like, there was a point when we were pushing up to Baghdad and I had the 9mm, my M16, and it's my birthday. It was 2 days before we got that in that firefight on March 25th. It's March 23rd. And I'm in the tracks and I'm like looking at the sky and holding my M16. And I'm like, how the F did I get here? What did I do in my life to deserve this? Right. And anyway, so when I got out, I was like, maybe med school isn't the right decision. Because every decision I made up to this point was to go to med school. And that's where it got me. So I started reevaluating my entire life. And I was like, what do you like to do, Jay? You know, I'm like talking to myself. And I always loved figuring stuff out. How to work the system, how to get what you want, how to influence, right? And I love business. You know, it's like, I look back when I was like in 6th grade, right? I started this little candy business. Because we were pretty poor when we were kids. Like, we lived in trailers. We had our septic system in the back that was covered by like plywood, and like, you know, like we had cinder blocks as our front steps, and you know, there was insulation, pink insulation all over the place because the dogs tore it up or like whatever. And so we were in, I remember this was like, I was with my mom, and down in Pennsylvania, you didn't have Costco at the time. You had Sam's Club. And I convinced my mom to give me like $6 or $7 or $8, whatever it was, to buy like this massive bag of like lollipops, right? And so I'm like, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to get a little 3x5 card. I'm going to take my little inventory. I'm going to get a little box, which is like my pencil box. I'm going to put that in my bag, and I'm going to sell these things for 25 cents. Business was booming. It was awesome. Go to Sam's. We get some other, let's try something else. Let's get some lemon heads. We'll throw some lemon heads in there, right? And like all this different candy, right? And now like the inventory is like, it was just a lot of fun. And my brother at the time, Nate, I was like telling him like, dude, you got to do this with me. Like, I'm making like, you know, we could get as much chocolate milk as we want. Like, this is awesome. And anyway, so he gets into it. And then all of a sudden one day we get called to the principal's office. And my mom's there. And I'm like, what is this about? And I have no idea, right? I have no idea what it's about. I don't even think it has anything to do with the candy, right? And principal's like, Jason? I was like, yeah. He's like, are you selling candy? I'm like, yes. And then he's like, Nate, are you selling candy? And he's like, yes. And he's like, we're going to need you, you know, just goes down this whole thing, like why we cannot do it on the school premise and all this whatnot. Anyway, I'm like, how did they find out? Apparently, my brother had this little girlfriend, and this little girlfriend got mad at my brother, ratted it, and that's how they found out. But anyway, so, you know, fast forward.
Relationships.
And I'm like, I got to figure this out. Like, you know, I love healthcare and medicine, but maybe I should try business. And that's kind of like where my head was at. Now I'm no longer going to med school. Right now, I'm like, I'm going to try a different path, because that was just intense. Like every moment from like high school, living on the streets, bouncing around the houses, getting in the bad car accident, make the decision to go in the military, somehow end up in war. You know, I'm like, oh my goodness.
With no anchor points to California, San Diego, what kept you here when you got out?
Pretty simple. The
Candy.
The candy, the financial aspect. Because when I got out, I still wanted to finish school, even though, you know, at this point I decided like, let me just figure this out a little bit. I don't know what I'm going to do exactly. But I want to take a different path. I have to test it, right? So I was looking at schools, because when you get out, you could be a resident immediately in the state that you get out in, or you could keep your residency in the state that you signed up in. So I was looking at, I had like a semester or two that I had to go through before I transferred into a university. And so I was looking at New York, and for community college, it was like $3,500, something like that, to get through. And I was like, I don't want to pay that. And then in California, I was looking at Saddleback Community College in Mission Viejo, and it was $8 a unit at the time. Like it was basically like $20 a class, you know? So I was like, $20 a class. And then I got the mountains, I got the surf, I got the girls. I'm like, sorry, mom and dad, you guys are going to have to fly.
No snow.
Yeah.
Or at least that you have to deal with shoveling your driveway.
Yeah. So I ended up staying. And like establishing a life here. I lived in Dana Point for a while, finished community college in Saddleback, and transferred over to Cal State Fullerton. A lot of my friends went to USC or UCLA. I didn't want to be in debt for college, you know, and I decided to go for business with a minor in marketing. And I went to Cal State Fullerton. But the thing was, I went back to my old ways. I ended up working during the day. And then because I needed to support myself, went to school at nighttime. And then when it came to actually living that college life, I just lived it, honestly, at USC. My friends went to AK Psi up there, which was like a business fraternity sorority. And so we were up there. I was up there all the time. So like on the weekends, I lived at pretty much USC, but then I went to school and I worked down here in Orange County.
Now, when you talk about your mindset switched from I want to be a doctor, medical, I want to go business, figuring out things, how they work.
Yeah.
Was your mindset, I want to work for a company, or was it always about entrepreneur side? Like, I want to be my own boss.
It was company, actually. It was corporation. That's what I was thinking. And so there's all these things that have happened in my life that I've just been like, how did I end up here? Right. And a lot of those things that happened in my life thus far have like been a little bit a part of history, which is crazy. When I was in the hospital in Portsmouth, do you remember the USS Cole?
Mm-hmm.
How it got bombed? So all the ones that got injured in that from that ship, they went to, if I remember correctly, they went to Germany, or they went to like obviously one of our international hospitals, and then from there they got on a flight. They actually went to the Naval Hospital in Portsmouth. Well, guess who was working in the ER at the Naval Hospital in Portsmouth? This guy. And so my chief comes up and he's like, hey, you, and you, I'm going to need you to help bring these sailors in, because like I just need a small group of you, and I need you to be buttoned up because everyone's going to be there. CBS, NBC, Fox News, blah, blah, blah. So that was like a crazy, very, very intense moment, because some of these sailors were coming in like coding. And like, obviously at the time I was just thinking about like making sure that we get these people safe and stabilized. But looking back at it, I'm like, that was actually a big part of, that was a history moment, you know? OIF1, that was a history moment. That actual firefight that happened on March 25th, our lieutenant that ended up getting out, he's being like put up for the Navy Cross, right? That push from Kuwait to Baghdad, there was an NBC guy with us, Chip Reed. And so he documented that entire time. There's actually a book out that's really good. I should get you a copy. That just kind of tells you the story of like everything that we did up to the moment. It's so funny because I didn't think I could read that book. I was like, I got it. And I just like kept it on the shelf. I was like, this is going to make me either one or two things. This is going to be a great book, or I'm going to spiral really bad. Right. Ended up finally getting the guts to read through it. And I read it within like less than 3 days. You know, I just like flying through it. And then when I was reading it, it's kind of cool because it tells a story, and then it talks about post-traumatic growth, right? Which is something I never heard of at that point. I was like, PTG? What is PTG? But the transition from telling the story to going into the PTG, there's a little part that basically states that like they get put up in these like beautiful 4-star hotels when we got to Baghdad. I was like, Are you what? That's where they were hanging out, and we're in these firefights. Watching tracers go through. It was pretty funny, man. But it's been quite a journey. It's been really, really, really cool. And so, I'm sure you've been there too, right? Like, with all the time that you did on the force, there's probably been moments where you're like, whoa, how did I get here in this moment of time?
I think for me, the moments that will always stand out is post-children. I would say that the closest I probably ever came to losing my job was after we lost our first two, and then my first day back to work was involved a child, a guy and a child. And if it wasn't for a partner of mine, probably easily would have lost my job, maybe would have even ended up in prison. Just not the right headspace to be back to work. But then I remember at that time, so you're talking, I was in the detective bureau. My kids were born. We were just standing up what would grow into a multi-agency SWAT team, but it was fledgling at that point. So, we got called to the city I worked for was on the old original Route 66. Right. So there were a bunch of old Fleabag style hotels. Right. Guy and a girl in there. The guy was holding the girl hostage-ish. And so, you're in a surround call out type operation. And I remember being at the rear with another partner of mine. And that was something for me that it was, I'm going home to my kids. He pokes his head out that window. I'm going home to my kids. Yeah. So those kind of moments. In general, I had a very uneventful career. The best part of my career was the last 8 years when I got to lead men and women and see them do good things. Right. That's probably the most enjoyable time in my career. Like I told you earlier, I worked fraud. Right. Nobody in a front-leaning rest position when they're in the academy is thinking about fraud.
You weren't either.
No.
Right?
No, I wanted to work narcotics like everybody else.
Right.
And so, but I found fraud, found it by accident, found that I loved it. Yeah. So I had some fun cases that I worked in there. But from the grand scheme of things, they aren't going to end up on TV shows. Right.
Right.
But
sometimes those are the best ones though, right?
They were fun. Yeah. It's the way things play out. My partner had a case, a kid had stolen mail from a mailbox. And the family had just gotten a HELOC loan on their house. And so the bank being very convenient for this family, hey, your HELOC's been approved and here's 5 or 6 checks if you want to start writing against, your approved HELOC. And so this kid had a blue mohawk, piercings in his face, and he writes himself a check. It could have been $100,000. I'm not exactly sure the amount, but just a ridiculous amount.
Thank God those did not land in my mailbox.
He writes on the note, funny you're talking about like school and everything.
Right.
College tuition.
Right. He figured it out.
The best part,
thought he figured it out.
He thought he figured it out. The best part was he went to the one bank that he had access to, which was the joint account that he shared with his mom. And it was a small credit union. Why they even cashed the check, I don't know. But they ultimately cashed it. He went out and he bought a Cadillac cash. And
nobody asked why, where the money came from.
If you're a car salesman and some kid walks in and goes, I've got cash, I want to buy this.
Right.
He might have bought 2 of them, like 40 or 50 grand of it. And so I remember we finally got him into custody and arrested him. I'm like, hey, what'd you do with the rest? And he goes, you could say I took a trip to Colombia and 50 grand worth in the span of maybe 3 months. It's like, that was one hell of a ride, dude.
Oh my God. No.
So little things like that stick out in my mind.
Wow.
But for the most part, my career was uneventful and I'm very fortunate that I had an uneventful career.
Well, I think what's really cool, because I've listened to some of your podcasts and I'll definitely listen to a lot more. But how you even started this transition drill, right? It was like you were preparing, if I'm, correct me if I'm wrong, like you were preparing for you to transition.
No,
Is
actually,
that it?
no. So I give credit to my former chief, Joe. It was the middle of COVID. I think maybe a little selfishly driven on his part because he was thinking about his transition.
Right.
Because at the time when I kicked this off, I was still 5 or 6 years minimum from getting out. Yeah, I was thinking about retirement, but it wasn't in the extreme forefront of my mind at that point in time.
Yeah.
Chief came up with this idea that he wanted to have a network of retirees who all were people we knew who had gone on and done something other than law enforcement. And sounded interesting to me. Yeah, I'll take the lead on it. Because we're in the middle of COVID, we couldn't do anything in person. What he wanted to do was he wanted to host a lunch, like once a month. Bring one of these people back, let them just talk about their transition into the civilian world.
Right.
Because we couldn't do it in person, we did it via Zoom, jumped on it. I did 3 or 4 of these. And they were very bare bones basic because I didn't need to go into anybody's backstory. Everybody pretty much, and it was all internal. It was only for people, within my office. And so they were real short, 25, 30 minutes, so that someone could go get chow, come back to their desk, log into this thing and listen to somebody give some advice about making a transition. And after about 3 or 4 episodes, I started getting emails offline. Hey, you really do a good job with that. You think about making it a podcast. And that's where it exploded.
Right.
And then, like I told you, at the time when I started it, I was still active with the DA's office.
Yeah.
I was very fortunate that they gave me carte blanche. Hey, you want to do this? Go forth and prosper. They gave me mandated no oversight. They didn't do anything like, hey, we want to review every one of your episodes.
Right. These are the only questions that you could ask. You got to stay within these lanes.
Yep. They gave me no parameters.
That's very cool.
And I was very fortunate because of that. And it was, ironically enough, though, very naively on my part, I was just going to focus on first responders. And even probably more smaller than that, probably would have focused more on just police officers because that's what was normal for me.
Right. Because that's what you were doing.
Yeah. And it was the conversation with our in-house legal counsel when I was kicking it off. And I had the last conversation like, yeah, you've been approved. You can do this podcast. You can talk to veterans too. And it was just that light bulb moment. It's like, wait a minute. Exactly.
Amazing idea.
And so that's how it started.
That's cool.
So yes.
But did it help you though? Like, I mean, I understand like you got to give credit, but like, I feel, wasn't that also a part when you were transitioning out?
Here's what I have learned since doing this.
Yeah.
Is that I thought I had a plan for what I wanted to do post law enforcement.
Right.
I had an idea that I wanted to still work. I had an idea that I wanted to initially, when I was a worker bee, I was going to retire, but I wanted to stay in some sort of investigative realm, but not another law enforcement agency.
Right.
I wanted to go to the corporate side. Then I promoted. And what I didn't do well was once I was now in a leadership position, there's a completely different can of worms that gets opened from the corporate side of the house as a leader and what they want, the HR training and all of that.
Compliance.
I just assumed that I would take my experience as an investigator, my experience as a leader, and become a leader within an investigative team.
Right.
And they're like, that's great in theory, but you need this and you need this and you need this. And I didn't do that part well at all going into my transition. So I really struggled. And then I found myself kind of at that kind of weird no man's land. We're in Temecula.
Yeah.
So I'm an hour and change from San Diego and I'm an hour and 45 from LA. And you start finding job opportunities. And you're like, I just finished working for 35 years. Do I want to go take another career now where I'm spending 2.5, 3 hours a day on the road every day? And so it was just a lot of things that I wasn't as prepared as I could have been. And I've learned that in doing this podcast by talking to a lot of people who either didn't have a plan when they made their transition. Yeah. Or they thought they had a plan and the plan really wasn't like me. Yeah. Well thought out. Or some who did, hey, this is what I'm going to do. And even with a perfect plan and everything, I think about some of what's immediately come into mind is a couple of the guests who were pilots in the military and wanted to make the transition to being a civilian pilot. And you would think that the aviation world were like, hey, yeah.
Right.
And even they were like, this was a process.
Wow.
And I think a lot of veterans and first responders kind of do this. We get so used to the value and the importance of our jobs and what we do that when we transition out, we think that we're immediately just going to be, hey, wow, you did that. Come on in to have this job.
Yeah.
And as much as corporate America wants the skill and experience, you're still going to have to jump through their hoops.
Right.
And they're still going to have some basics that they want you to be able to do and perform that you have to prepare and plan for.
Yeah.
So that's what's driven this podcast.
Yeah, no, it's great. I mean, it's a great story. And I'm sure you've just met some fascinating people. You know
I've
what I
been
mean? And
very, very fortunate.
Yeah.
For people who are watching, the reason why these books sit between us.
I was going to ask. I have a feeling, but like, let me know.
Every one of those authors has been on the podcast. So I
love it.
To me, that's my wall of fame.
Yeah.
I'm very fortunate. That's just a small percentage, but
right.
Every one of those authors has taken their time to share their story and their books. So
that is very cool. You know, like talking about transitions.
When you look forward to that first cup of coffee, as soon as that morning alarm goes off, then Blue Line Roasting is the choice for you. They're a Tennessee-based law enforcement-owned company. They're roasting small batches of premium coffee, fresh, within 48 hours of your ordering, and ship fast so it doesn't sit around getting stale. From Patriot, their light roast, to Failure Drill, their dark roast. They've got something that fits whatever you prefer. Whole bean or ground, it's your call. But Blue Line Roasting is more than just good coffee. A portion of every purchase goes to support law enforcement families who are dealing with line of duty injury or loss. So your morning routine becomes something bigger. Great coffee and real impact. Grab a single bag, try a sampler, or set up a subscription so you're never caught without it. Shipping is always free. And for the listeners of this podcast, use the promo code TRANSITION10 to get 10% off your order. Head on over to bluelineroasting.com and make your morning count.
So right now we're working on a very cool project to help transitioning veterans out of the military, or maybe they're like transitioning into a different career, something like that. We had a meeting yesterday with the DAV.
Before we get into that program,
sure.
Do you want to talk more about what your company is and how you got to where it is today?
Yeah. We could definitely go into that. All right, so let's fast forward through some career stuff. You know, I got to a point where I needed to figure out. So I was finishing my degree at Cal State Fulton, was working full time. What I was doing was mortgage. Actually, I got into the subprime mortgage industry. Another history moment, right, where everything got tanked.
0708 was a wonderful time.
I go straight to war, and I'm in a freaking call center, and I'm tethered to this computer, and I could only walk in this 4x4 space. I was driving me crazy. And then as soon as a call dropped, it got picked up, you know, just automated system. And at that time, what I was doing was basically helping families understand what they signed. A lot of these mortgages at the time, you know, they were signed with an APR, right? Like anything, but they were adjustable APRs. And so like the first 2 years, amazing. I have this great interest rate. I get in this $500,000 house, whatever the case is. Maybe, you know, they're thinking I'll go ahead and refinance by the time that 24 months is up. Well, guess what? 24 months is up. And we're getting the phone calls because their mortgage just jumped from like $2,000 a month to $10,000 a month, right? And that was happening everywhere. So guess who was taking those calls? This guy. And that was pretty crazy. And I went through that industry a lot, and that's a big story too. That I was like, maybe I need to reevaluate my life again. You know, my decisions. I'm like, these people are extremely unethical. I'm like, that is not what I'm here for. You know, like I wanted to go to med school to help people. Then I decided to do business to hopefully help people, right? And I'm not. And I'm like, how do I bring these two worlds together, right? How do I bring healthcare and bring business together? And at the time I was thinking about pharma, right? So I was like, well, maybe I'll get in like pharmaceutical sales. And so I link up with a group down in San Diego, Orion International at the time, that was the name of it. And basically it was a recruiting agency for junior military officers, JMOs. I was not a junior military officer. I was enlisted. But because I had my degree, I could actually apply and go through their program. The program is absolutely phenomenal. They take you in for 3 days. Basically, you go down there first night, it's the meet and greet. You get to meet like hiring managers and, the teams and meet people that are trying to like transition their careers. Next day, it's like death by PowerPoint. It's like the typical death by PowerPoint. Seriously. Where all the companies come in and they basically say, this is who we are. This is what we're looking for. This is the job. This is the pay. Right. And then the next day is you basically check this form. Who do you want to interview with? And so instead of, trying to interview for these companies yourself and having things spread over 6 months, you're getting 8 interviews with the hiring managers, not even going through recruiters the next day. Absolutely phenomenal. And so sit down with the recruiter and he's just like, Jay, what do you think about actually working in medical device? And I'm like, no way. I'm pharma only. And obviously I didn't know what I was talking about, right? So he's like, no, like I think it might be a really good fit for you. I was like, look, I'm not going to sell gurneys. I'm not going to sell Chuck's pads, and I'm definitely not selling syringes, right? He's like, no, I don't think you understand. I was like, one, the company's Johnson & Johnson. I'm like, what do you mean, like the baby powder company? I'm like, what kind of medical device?
They also make shampoo.
Yeah. What kind of medical device are they selling, right? They're like, it's so funny looking back at this. It's like how naive I am at these moments of my life. It's just like, oh my goodness, it's too funny. But anyway, they're like, no, they're actually, they're surgical devices that are utilized in minimally invasive surgery, and you're in surgery all day long. And I'm like, there's a job like that? They're like, yeah. Like, would you be interested? I'm like, yeah. If I could be in surgery, absolutely. And I'm going back to like, oh, this is perfect. I'll just start working for this company and get into med school and become a surgeon. I'm like trying to figure that out.
Again, naive.
Yeah. And anyway, that started my career in medical sales. And I ended up being, I've been lucky to have a pretty successful career 16 years later, where I worked with, big companies like Johnson & Johnson. I worked with startups like Invitae out of the Bay Area. Worked at a recent company called Helpless AI out of Chicago. Worked with a startup company out of Irvine that was acquired by Invitae. I think that was maybe, I'm trying to remember if it was like $30 million acquisition. And it's just been quite a ride. I started in medical devices, and then I went into biotech. And at the end of the day, probably honestly since 2015, I've been specializing in genetic testing. And some of the genetic tests was hereditary cancer testing, so focusing on oncology. And then most recently, it was somatic genetic testing, where we're actually taking tissue samples from the tumor itself. And then we're sequencing that to find biomarkers that are actually making that tumor grow. And what you're trying to figure out is a plan to stop that, right? So that was quite the ride. And then probably since 2017, 2018, somewhere around there, started getting into AI, artificial intelligence, as like, you can't even sneeze without hearing something about AI now. You know what I mean? As soon as you turn on the TV, as soon as you look at your X post or Reddit threads, LinkedIn, it's everywhere, right? But back then, I was working for a company called Invitae. We ended up acquiring a company called Clear Genetics. That was pretty much a chatbot, an AI-driven chatbot for genetic counselors, to assist genetic counselors. And then what the genetic counselors typically do is they take the hereditary cancer testing results to say, for example, like like if you had an uncle that had colon cancer, right? And then like maybe your grandfather had colon cancer on the same family side, like they try to figure out like, let's sequence your genetic makeup. Let's see what kind of risk Paul has, right? And then if you do have a risk, then it's like, okay, well, we need to make sure that he's coming in every 6 months. We're going to be checking for X, Y, and Z to catch it before, right? And so it was a very cool platform because what it was doing was looking at the NCCN guidelines, which change all the time. NCCN is the basically a comprehensive like network where all the clinical data goes to that sets the standards on care for cancer. And so it would automatically pull this information in real time, and then it would give the genetic counselors basically like, advice and guidance on how to manage this stuff. So that's where I cut my teeth in AI. From there, worked at this company called Tempest AI, and Tempest AI, great company also. I was with them when they were private, and then they went public about 2 years ago in the summertime, and they're doing just like a lot of cool stuff to leverage AI on the clinical side as much as possible to take things to the next level. Like healthcare needs to be preventative, right? It's not. It's reactive. It's like I feel pain somewhere. I go in. I get a scan. I have cancer, right? Like, why? Why did it take that long? Like, it just means like we're not being as proactive as we really can. And what we're going to see with time, and we're already seeing it, is where this type of technology is going to help us get there. But what I realized is that as I've gone down this biotech AI journey, is that if you turned around and looked at the company, there is just so much opportunity to apply that technology internally on the operational side. And sometimes like the companies were doing absolutely great, like, with the technology, like super focused on like, utilizing it when samples are coming in and, obviously like sequencing the genes and so forth. But I saw opportunity, and Q4 of last year ended up basically taking this whole pivot in my career and decided it's time to go off on your own, right? There were some things that happened that helped me make that decision. And I started Inovo AI. Basically, what I wanted to do was build out an agentic AI native company that is able to help small and mid-sized businesses with operational efficiencies, right? Being from the Hudson Valley in New York, it's all mom and pop shops, right? It's family-owned businesses. And it's a lot of blue-collar businesses that could really use the technology, but they may not know how to use it. We're going to be going through this transition, and we're seeing it right now where, the baby boomers are actually selling their companies, right? There's going to be an influx of transitioning. Either they're going to sell the company or the next generation is going to take over the company, right? Now, the next generation that takes over the company, or even the companies that are being acquired, that technology needs to be there, right? And to run a business at its most optimal level, you have to be efficient in operations. So that's what we're doing. We're basically looking at a company and finding, areas where we get a couple small wins, right? Like, what are you doing multiple times a day that is an absolute time suck? Let's talk about that, right? If there was one thing that you wanted to change about your business that would free up your time to do what you really want to do, what is it? Let's chat about it. So like basically what we're doing is we're building either automation processes, right? Or we're building out agentic platforms just from the very beginning. And for those that aren't familiar with agentic AI, I'll back up. There's like three main parts of AI, right? You have your analytical AI, which is going to be AI that is based on numbers. Just think numbers. Generative AI, which is going to be your ChatGPTs, it's going to be your Geminis, right? It's natural language AI. And then agentic AI is actually building out these tools, we'll say, that like you tell it to do one thing, you give the input, and it provides you an output. So you build multiple agents to do a job, right? So that's what we're doing. And that's where we're at today. Pretty exciting.
The aspect of, and depends on what news story you hear, depends on what person you talk to. They say that, there's the fear side of it.
Oh yeah.
AI is taking over the world.
It's real.
The more I use it, the more I kind of look into it. I do believe there's a little part of me that believes the people in charge of AI are leveraging a little bit of this Chicken Little end of the world storyline to continue to make their AI valuable in a weird way. It seems to me from the outsider looking in, it's a very powerful tool. It can be used for a lot of things. But I think it seems like the more the stories go on is the negative aspect of it. It's coming for your job. But every generation, every millennia, whatever you want to refer to it, has gone through periods where new technology has gotten rid of old ways of doing things.
Right.
You talk about, the Hudson Valley and farming. There was the first guy that bought a tractor.
Yeah.
Okay. And
So
the guy that used to, maybe he had a service where he'd bring his horse and his plow and like, wait a minute, he can do 12 fields in a day and I can do 2.
Yeah.
Shit. Okay. It's the cycle of life. It's the cycle of business. But it seems to me is that the more you really kind of peel back that curtain, AI can't do all that they try to scare you into thinking. Am I wrong?
Depends. I mean, that's pretty
broad.
Yeah, it's pretty broad. I mean, I do absolutely agree with you. With every generation, there's maybe a technology or multiple technologies that really changed the trajectory of like the future, right? Even like in our lifetime, right? Right off the bat, my dad, when he transitioned from the Coca-Cola business, he actually started a computer business, and which has turned into an IT cybersecurity company business. And during that time, that was a big major shift because there were no home computers, right? And if they were extremely expensive and kind of like out of touch to like 80-90% of the people, right?
Right. So
at that time, it was like his whole pitch was like, don't go to Best Buy and spend $5,000. Like, what are you going to use this for? You're going to use it for like, getting on the internet and like maybe like writing some documents on Word, right? He's like, I'll do it for, $2,000, $1,500, whatever it is, customized just to you. That's how he started his business. But like during that time, it was like, it was also like people were fearful of, because now you're taking this technology that's only understood by scientists and like SMEs out there in the world, and you're putting it in my home. Like, it's almost like an invasion of privacy, right? Like there's all this fear. I feel like when technologies do come out, it's like, there's always fear. It's like, maybe the only one that didn't have fear is like the pager. Or I don't know, like maybe like the phone, you remember the phones in the 80s that went in the car that was like this massive phone that went in the center. It was like that big bulky thing, right? But no, I think, but there's always
on
gonna
the
be
flip
fear.
side to that, though, you give enough time for enough people to use it.
Yeah.
And
they're going to adopt it.
Well, where I was going with it is you give enough people enough time to figure out what you can do subversively with it. And that's where the fear starts coming in, and
well, look at the internet, right? When that hit home, right? And you have like the dark side, right? And then you have the light side, right? The people started adopting it right away, but I think there was also a fear of that too, and like how that might impact anything in the financial industry, like my financial banks. I don't know. You know what I mean? I feel like you just have this all the time. I think we're just going through another transition where it's just like, I mean, you just hear it in the news all the time. It's like, there were however many layoffs at Meta, right? And we hear this a lot. And I feel like these companies right now, what they're doing is like they're preparing, right? And so what they're preparing for is they're not even there yet to use this technology at where it needs to be, but they know they're building the teams to do it. And you know what?
AI is not one of those things you can play catch up with.
No. And they're pretty much like, you know what? Look, we know we're going to have to let these people go anyway, because we have to restructure completely. There's going to be roles that are not going to be there anymore, but there's going to be new roles that nobody's even talking about that are going to be there. So how about this? How about we restructure? How about we let these people go? And then we will create the new roles. We'll all of a sudden have a decrease in cost. We'll allow our stock to go up. And then we'll slowly trickle everybody back in. That's what I see happening.
My honest opinion on this is that if you're in a profession today that has not fully adopted AI, you should be on your own, learning how AI could change your job, take your. I don't like the word "take" because all
enhance. How about a positive word, right?
Right. Well, what I mean is in the sense of if it can do what you do, is take the right word? Yeah, I guess it is take, but it's automation. It's improving. It's efficiency. And there's that aspect of it. But then there's the aspect of, okay, you don't want to lose your job today. Find out how you can use AI to make yourself
add value,
more efficient,
more valuable. Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
That's where your mindset should be, is not fearing AI, but going, true. How can I use it to make me more? I've had a conversation with somebody who did marketing.
Yeah.
And there is the process of working through an idea, coming up with an idea. And so they were talking about how, hey, it might take me 3 days to do a client's project, whatever they want. If I can take an AI platform, an LLM, and input the parameters of what I'm looking for, and it can spit me out a project, or at least get me in the ballpark of where I want this project to be. If I can do that more efficiently, okay, maybe I'm not charging as much per client, but I'm making up for it in volume. Because where I might have only been able to process 6 clients in a month, maybe with using AI, I can process 20. Yeah. So I charge a little bit less, but I let AI do the bulk of the work.
Right. Yeah. I was having this discussion yesterday with a client. So this client is in the fashion industry / basically it's a talent agency really, for models and also for creatives, also actors and so forth. And I was going over, typically what we do is we have a specific framework that we take everybody through. The first step is like a discovery, right? It's like, but we call it audit. And it's like auditing basically what their current workflows are, what systems they're using and so forth. And so they're teaching me and I'm kind of like, soaking everything in, and I'm trying to understand the system so I can figure out how to automate it. And I'm like, well, who does this? And like, when it goes from this point to that point, what happens next? And I was like, what if we did this? And he was like, well, that's what our agents do, because they're like talent agents, right? And so right away I saw fear like in his eyes, right? And I was like, look, let's just be here real quick. You got to understand, like, these solutions are not here to take your agent's job. But what it is here to do is enhance their capabilities. So maybe you were finding talent, right? And they were only able to see 10 people a day. How would it change your business if they were able to see 20 people a day, right? Now, the only reason why they could see only 10 is because they have to do all this manual stuff. But they're extremely creative. And what they bring to the table is like relationships and building relationships. Let them spend time on that. Let's take away all this administrative stuff so they could really help build your business. And then he was like, oh, well, if you put it that way, so it's just interesting. And I mean, we're learning things, you know, every client that we bring on, it's just like, it's a different conversation. And honestly, that's the best part of it. It's so much fun. It's so much fun about learning about all these different industries and all these different problems. How many times did I tell you I was trying to figure it out, right? Throughout my life, you know, and here it is. It's like, I'm sitting down with you side by side. Let's figure this out together, you know? And now we have these cool tools to actually utilize, you know, it's these tools are really like bringing everyone down to like almost like the same level for once in our lifetime. And it's really like up to you if you want to embrace it, right? And take it and run with it. You know, like when the internet came out, we went through the .com, right, era. And I'm not saying this is a bubble like the .com era, but the people that made out of that and made a shit ton of money were the people that actually just went in headfirst, right? And there's some people that won, there's some people that lost, you know, but the internet's still here.
I like the other aspect, and I've seen a couple articles recently talking about, and they've used the analogy of a lot of young kids today are being drawn back to albums and vinyl.
Oh, so cool.
And the record industry has actually put out some reports recently that record sales have actually increased over the last few years. And they took the same article or the same angle with these two articles where they're saying AI is here. Automation is here. It will continue to evolve.
It's only going to get better.
What you could lean into is the person-to-person aspect. So when they equated it to some of the most high-end hotels, where it's not just a room with a bed, it's they curate your stay. The Four Seasons, for example. When you go to stay at a Four Seasons, they do a little bit of research on you. They kind of know a little bit more than just John Smith checking into room 123.
Right.
And so, especially if you're somebody who's well known, they will curate your stay a little bit better. You could do the same thing in conjunction with this automation of AI. Find an aspect that people are going to want that person-to-person contact and make it 5-star, which will set you apart.
It's interesting, like if you follow Y Combinator, you know, Y Combinators, for those that don't know, it's like basically for startups, right? It's like the best startup university you go to, right? Without being a university. It's like a boiling room just with like amazing minds solving problems. And so a lot of the things that have been coming across there, they're talking about like the future of AI and like where is it going? And basically they're like the next stage is kind of like what you're talking about, where everything, just like Four Seasons, it's going to be curated. It's going to be what I like to say bespoke, right? So there are customized solutions. And that's kind of like what we do, right? We're going in there, we're figuring out the problem, then we're potentially building out a platform that's custom to you. But they're even seeing this even more customized, where you land on a website, and if I know that your company is a podcast company and you focus on first responders and veterans, the website, all of a sudden when you log in or click on something, it's already researched you and automatically has changed the whole front page, landing page, to be catered towards you specifically. Which is like, it's almost like it's like a chameleon. It's wild. It's crazy. But it's going to be very cool to see. I mean, what I was leaning into earlier was one thing that we're doing right now is we're partnering with a company called EYS. It's called Evolve Your Success. And this is a company that basically helps people, talent that wants to get into the medical industry, get into medical sales specifically. And medical sales is not an easy industry to get into. It's very, very competitive because it's very, very lucrative, right? And Samuel, who built out this company, basically built a program where, you know, they'll bring you in, they'll help you update your LinkedIn, help you update your resume, but they'll put you in front of...
that mic closer.
they'll put you in front of hiring managers. They'll put you in front of doctors that will sit down and say, this is what I expect from a medical sales rep. They like put in the work, right? Because they want to make sure that you're successful. And so Samuel approached me like years ago about, he does podcasts too. And he was just like, I would love for you to come on and like talk about your experience in medical sales, you know, because I've led teams and all this other stuff. And I was like, I'd love to. And then it's kind of led to where we are today, because like now I broke off and I'm starting my own company, right? It's actually, cool thing about this company is actually there's two of us. We're both combat veterans. So it's veteran ran, veteran operated. We both went to Iraq together, side by side, both in Baghdad together. It's just very cool. Like my background's like business development, sales. His background is like cybersecurity, IT, finance and stuff. But anyway, so back to Sam, I'm like, hey, did you ever think of actually like working with transitioning veterans or veterans at all to help them get into medical sales? Because I went through this amazing program called Orion International, but like that program, you know, it's for junior military officers. It doesn't really help the enlisted unless you have a degree. I love what you're doing. It could really help a lot of veterans. And he's like, yeah, we tried this a couple of years ago, but the government wanted us to have like certain boxes checked off. Like we had to have a brick and mortar. We don't have a brick and mortar. So like we just kind of stopped. And I was like, well, there are other ways to help these veterans than go through, you know, specific programs in the government, right? To find out if there's contracts available and stuff. So anyway, we started working together. And right now we're in the position where we're going to be using agentic AI to help identify veterans that are interested of getting in this industry. Plus we have other avenues. We'll be getting the talent. We're talking to the DAV, which is, you know, the Disabled American Veterans Group, because they're doing like a bunch of job fairs where people are trying to get jobs, right? And we're gonna basically get them to go through EYS to get that medical sales job that they really want. And like we're gonna be able to do it at such a bigger scale than we've ever been able to do it before. So we're really excited about that. We're gonna see where that one goes.
You mentioned previously the lucrative side of medical sales.
Sure.
For somebody transitioning out, do they have to have the medical background to get into it? Or is it something that you can learn on the job, so to speak?
You can. It really depends on the hiring managers, and it depends on the job. Like a lot of these companies, sometimes if you're going specifically into sales, maybe not like finance for medical industry or other departments, but for sales, there's typically like an associate sales rep that is kind of like a support for the actual sales executive. So usually that's a great way to get in if you don't have the medical background. It really comes down to the hiring manager. That's what it comes down to. But even, you know, when I was in the military, I was telling this story the other day too. My first paycheck, my actual W-2 for the year was $19,000. You know, like it was nothing. And by the time I got out, it wasn't much more. It was like maybe $40,000, $50,000. No, I don't even think I hit 50. It had been like $40,000. You know, with these jobs, you start out, it could be anywhere from 80,000 to 150,000, you know, as a base pay. That's not even commission, right? Or benefits and stuff like that. So it's very competitive to get in, but that's why this program is so very cool, to help them become, a success case by putting them in front of the hiring managers, putting them in front of the doctors and so forth. And then just to team up with them to give back, you know, to the veteran community. And you don't have to be a vet, right? You could be a spouse. You could be a child of a veteran, right? We're just really excited to help as much as we can.
Is it geographic specific to get into the industries or operate in the industries?
No, not this industry. I mean, not at all. Not at all. I mean, especially like Johnson & Johnson's all over the world, right? Boston Scientific's all over the world. Stryker, like some of these kind of, like if you wanted to even work in another country, totally do it. Actually, a cool story is like when I started with Ethicon Endosurgery, that was, you know, J&J has hundreds of companies, right? And this is their medical device side. When I went to training, and that training was intense, super intense. Like I'm like one of those guys that has to study. You know what I mean? I don't know how you are. Like, I don't just automatically get it and just get an A on a test. Like, I got to put in the time and effort.
You did brag about taking your ASVAB and acing it without studying, though.
I didn't say ace it. I did good enough to pick I could pretty much pick any job except nuke. That was the only one I couldn't pick. But I was fine with that because I didn't want to be in a submarine anyway. But then I look back, I'm like, I could have made a lot of money. But yeah, where was I going with this? I just lost my train of thought right there.
We were talking about the geography of it.
Geography.
Going into the training program and being very stressful.
So basically the training program. So when I went there, this is in Cincinnati, I would say probably like 40% of the class were international sales reps, which was amazing. So cool. Met people from all over the world, the Netherlands, like, I don't know, like Ireland, and like, they're basically doing the same thing you're doing, but like in other countries. So no, you don't have to be anywhere geographically. It's pretty much anywhere and everywhere, even like internationally. But these jobs are out there. You just you got to know how to look. You got to know where to look. Now today with LinkedIn, it makes things so much easier. It's like you could just ping, people within the industry and hope that somebody reaches back out to you. But yeah, I'm always an advocate of like helping. Actually, what I did when I was at, these earlier companies, like with Invitae, I was with them for 5 years or so, and with Tempest, is that a lot of these companies have ERG groups, which are employee resource groups. And these resource groups could be for, say, the Spanish Society or Pacific Islander Society, or like veterans, right? And so these companies didn't have one for the veterans. So at Invitae, I started a group. I helped start a veteran ERG group. There's 3 of us, which was very, very cool. And I kind of cut my teeth in there, and we started doing like some podcasts and stuff like that. And the idea was obviously to bring that veteran community together as a company, but also get like nuggets of information from these executives, right, that are in the company that were veterans or maybe officers or something like that, get some visibility. And then I started one at Tempest from the ground up. I took everything I learned at Invitae, started from the ground up by myself there. And that was very cool. And I was like, I have this bigger vision. How can I help more people? Also, when you're in the industry, you get laid off. It happens a lot. Unfortunately, it's just happened to me twice. And twice is way too many times. And
I'm sure it happened at the most opportune time for you personally.
I mean, it just not only impacts you, it impacts your family. It's just a freaking disaster. But these companies go through restructuring all the time, and especially like the sales force always gets hit. So I was thinking, like, how can I help veterans at a bigger level, at a higher level? And also like give myself an opportunity, a little selfishly, to better prepare myself in case there is a layoff, right? So I was like, here it is, trying to figure something out again. I'm like, I'm going to create a 501c3, and I'm going to create a nonprofit. And that nonprofit is going to be like the mothership of all ERGs out there. And basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to find out who leads the ERG at Google, at Apple, at NVIDIA, at J&J, at, and then just have everybody funnel up to this 501c3, build a community. And that way, in case there are layoffs, or if you want to get promoted, or if you're trying to get yourself into another company, you could just be within that community and just, spider web off that. And so we're working on that one right now. And it's kind of like a backdoor to get into these companies. So like, teaming up with EYS and having the 501c3 is going to help veterans, because it helps us guide, because we know the leads within the ERGs to say, hey, we have, this female or this male that wants to get in the medical sales industry. Instead of going to human resources or the people's team, it's like, no, let's go to the veteran ERG. Let's go over there. And then let them help guide us on how to get this individual in to the company.
I think that's one of the biggest things that and this isn't just the veteran and first responder community.
Yeah.
This is business in general.
Right.
You always have to be looking at the next career or job because unfortunately, when you step outside the government umbrella, you don't have job security.
Right.
So you're always thinking about what's next. But the other component that we need to get better about, and I say we, the veteran first responder community, is the networking and relationship aspect. You cannot put a value on it.
No.
Because so many of the jobs, you referred to the backdoor aspect, but so many jobs get filled before they're ever even publicly announced, or they have to go through the HR requirements because HR says you have to publicly post it,
right?
But you already know who's going to get it,
right?
And so when you see the job listed, you're like, oh shit, I'm going to put my resume
got a chance.
In. And so you can't fault the system. You just have to understand how it operates.
Yeah.
But you have to figure out a way to make it, or how it works.
Right.
And so much of it is who knows you and who you know when those positions come available.
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy how these things work. I was on a flight back from the DAV out in like Cincinnati area, and I sit down and this gentleman actually saw a book bag. The book bag was like given to us as a gift. It was like, it said DAV, and he's like, hey, what do you do with the DAV? And we just started chatting and stuff like that. And I was like, yeah, I was in the military. I was like, what about you? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, what branch were you? And he's like, Navy. I was like, oh, cool. So was I. Long story short, this guy ends up being working for Google on security. And he is the personal security for the CEO of Google. He was actually a Navy SEAL. And he actually, just amazing story. We just had a great flight, great chat, right? And I was like, do you mind if I reach out to you? Because this is what I'm trying to do with this ERG group. But I'm trying to find out who's leading the ERG group at Google. He's like, yeah, just hit me up anytime. A week later, I just say, hey, just checking in, seeing how you're doing. He's like, yeah, no problem, buddy. Go speak to this person. Done. I'm in. And that's, I know I have the capability of doing that but not everybody's like me, right? Like not everybody's comfortable with being, talking to a complete stranger and telling them what you're trying to do and all this other stuff. But I want to be able to utilize,
that is like actually one of the negative byproducts of spending a bunch of years in these careers.
Yeah.
Is we become isolated.
Oh, we do.
We
get more specialized and there becomes a point when you're just like, when you might be on top and it's just like super lonely.
Well, I was going more for the aspect of insulated in the sense, or insulated and isolated is that the first thing we do is we get into these careers and they funnel us to only hang out with people we work with and people in these industries and these careers. And then the longer you're in these careers, it also builds that identity of fear everybody. Keep the outside away. Don't share, all of these things that complete opposite when it's time to transition and put yourself out to meet people and to have a LinkedIn profile that is, professional and start sharing your information. When you meet somebody, engage in that conversation as opposed to and very, we keep it very short and sweet. Oftentimes you'll find that when you do the aspect of people watching, I like watching veterans and first responders because a lot of times they're not the outgoing, hey, let's keep the conversation going. No. I answered your question. Now let's move on.
Until they go to the bar.
If you can get alcohol involved, then it's a different story.
Exactly. No, I absolutely agree, man. Absolutely agree. But yeah, I mean, we're excited to do a lot of cool stuff. I think what we really want to do is, help, just like I was going down the path and like becoming a doctor and going to med school is really to help people or in that situation, like the first question, like, what defined your why and how did you get where you are today? This is, you know, I've kind of like made that change in my career again. But it's still the same thing. It's like, we're trying to help organizations. You know, we're trying to identify the problem to provide a solution to help you get to that next level, right? And a lot of it's through technology. So it's very cool. And then on, you know, going back to my father's business, Alphatech, you know, that started with the personal computers, but that turned into like IT cybersecurity. Back then, he ended up getting inspired. So I've been around tech for a very long time. And he got inspired by my my Uncle Roy, because my Uncle Roy was in the Army, got out, actually worked for AT&T. That was his first job. And in communications. So he was a communication guy, right? And he ended up, when I was a kid, I remember this, like middle school. Yeah, maybe I was in sixth grade. I think it was sixth grade. He basically was like telling the family, we're all up in New York. He's like, you know, I just got a job offer. I'm not sure if I'm going to take it, but it's in North Carolina. And the family's like, no. What are you doing? You're not moving out of New York. And he was like, I think I have to take it. It's too good of an opportunity. And no one knew what he was talking about, but it was a startup company. And that startup company was Cisco Systems startup. Like, that was in 86 or something like that. So anyway, my dad got wind of what they were doing. And then that's how he started his company and then ended up building it where it is. And now what's even cooler is because I've completely taken this like tech route, which I'm sure I'll be back in healthcare, right? Because all my network is Cedars-Sinai, it's UCLA, it's USC Keck Medicine, it's Providence, it's Dignity, right? Like all those doctors I've been working with for years. But now I'm starting to work with my father, which is super cool. So he's going to be transitioning, right? And I have two brothers, my half brothers, the German Puerto Rican brothers, freaking hilarious. You know, he really wants them to take over the business. I think where they're at in their life right now, their maturity level is just like not there yet. So like he's been trying to prep them for years, but I'm coming in on this side and we're going to start working together and figuring this all out. But like Innovo AI will help provide services for Alphatech. We'll be partnering together to help companies in New York and so forth. One of the companies that we're looking to work with is called Orange County Ironworks. The cool thing about this company is that they actually, and going back to the Twin Towers, this is going to blow your mind. So they're a steel fabricator company. And this company provides all the steel, not all of it, but like for the high rises in New York City. Now, when the towers went down, the ones that provided the steel to the towers, Orange County Ironworks. You might know this company because they had another company.
Did motorcycles.
Yes, exactly. And so Dan Tuttle actually owns Orange County Ironworks. He was like the one brother that was never on the shows at all. Orange County Choppers. You had the father, you had senior, and you had the two brothers, but Dan was never in it. Because Dan was doing this, right? He was working on that business. That business was actually ran by their grandfather that basically was under, from what I was told, I don't know the whole story, but was pretty much like, if you want this, you could have it, you know? And then Dan Tuttle came in and just like, it's like a massive, amazing company right now. And my dad's doing work over there because he does all the IT for them. And they have these ridiculous, like, you should go in this building. It's like these massive robots, like managing these, like, who knows how many tons of steel, getting prepared to ship it down to the city. So cool. But they're extremely like veteran friendly. So it's like, we love that, you know, like how can we give back and how can we serve? Because we will serve the rest of our lives.
Right.
You know what I mean?
As we come in for our landing, any last piece of advice that you want to make sure that somebody hears? Especially, I like to keep it in the vein of transition, but if there's any piece that we haven't talked about that you really want to make sure that somebody hears from you.
Yeah, I think don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to test the waters, dip your toes, because you'll never know if you don't try, right? I think in my career, I had like a laser focus in one direction, right? And there was things that happened in my career where like I actually took the chance. Take a chance because you never know where it's going to go. But what I will say is that even though it might start all the way on the left and then all of a sudden you take that chance and it shifts all the way to the right, you'll eventually get to that North Star. So if there's something that I could leave is seize the day, take the opportunity, take a chance.
I appreciate your time. Thank you for sharing your story.
Yeah.
And I wish you all the best going forward, man.
Thank you. Exciting.